Alright everyone, there's a good chance you did not hear about this news. You didn't hear about it because the legacy media doesn't want to report on anything that would make Trump look good, or at least not make him look shitty. No, because 95+% of all their reporting is about Trump being evil and having small hands. Plus, the Cohen plea deal stuff sort of eclipsed everything else, including, for a while, the Manafort verdict, which is funny. North Korea is now officially promoting the idea that they should sign a peace treaty with South Korea. Now, it would take a long time of negotiation for this to happen. But Pompeo supposedly is going back over there again, and then their broadcasts since North Korea and South Korea had split. As far as I know, there's never been an instance in which their propaganda broadcasts have been positive and happy-go-lucky message of peace. There have been times when it's less warmongering. There are times that it's absent altogether, like their border loudspeaker sort of propaganda stuff. There are times, what passes for peace is basically no one's firing a missile off or shooting. That's been peace in the Korean Peninsula for a very long time. For them to do all of the things that they've done so far. They've returned some power mains. You haven't heard about that again because as far as anyone knows, they're real. Well, the legacy media doesn't want to admit that Trump got any power mains back. You had the summit where Kim Jong-un and President Moon both crossed into one another's country. Symbolically, of course. I mean, they rushed the border if anything had gone wrong. But, it's symbolic, and they hug, and they shake hands, and they say, oh, we should do this again soon. And they've had, I believe, a second meeting since then as well. It looks like we might get another Trump-Kim Jong-un summit. We should probably make sure that Jinping is there. Xi should be there. Moon should be there. Putin might have to be there. Now, anyone who has basically stake in the situation should be at the table. But ultimately, this is about North and South Korea want to officiate the end of the war. Now, what this means is very simple. It means that plans for denuclearization, plans for normalization in various ways could be vastly accelerated. Instead of a time scale of months, you'd be looking at potentially days or weeks. Because right now, the real thing is there's still technically a war going on. It's not a shooting war, it's not a hot war, nobody's bombing one another. Technically, the US and South Korea are still at war with the North Korean government. And they're acutely aware of this, which means everyone has to go slowly and tread carefully. If a peace treaty is signed, there would no longer be any legitimate reason that they could fear attack from the US because the US doctrine tends to not have preemptive warfare in it unless there's an existential threat. Now, of course, we've used that excuse wrongly in Iraq and also Afghanistan and in Libya and kind of in Egypt and in a dozen other places since we implemented it. But generally speaking, we do okay at not invading the whole world at the same time. And North Korea has nukes, so it's a little bit different anyway. The hope, ultimately, is a reunified Korea. It would take a very long time. The one saving grace is that North and South Korea are so culturally homogenous in an insular fashion, even though they've diverged some. It would be easier, I think, for them to glue their countries back together into one. The big sticking point would be civic. The big sticking point is, what form is the government going to take? Is it going to be Juche? Is it going to be a Western democracy? Is it going to be some, the Chinese-style mixed model? Are we going to fall primarily under the Chinese or American umbrellas? Obviously, the preference for most people is that they end up a westernized country. I think, by the way, North Korea would end up becoming the wealthier half of Korea after a time. I'll tell you why. Developers would go in and massively expand things very quickly. North Korea has the industrial resources. South Korea has more the tech that's been built up for manufacturing and heavy industry and light industry, a lot of technological materials related to electronics and computing. Also has a lot more agriculture. Like South Korea can feed itself. North Korea barely can. They don't have actually that much arable land. In truth, North Korea, while less developed and more rural in many aspects, actually has less farming going on, partially the result of the fact that they can't get the seeds that they would need to plant from anyone but the Chinese, and the Chinese have agreed to certain embargoes. I think it's almost related to agriculture. The reason why the North Koreans are at the table is that China said, well, we won't give you any seed. You're going to have to plow most of your grain back into the ground to keep growing it. You'll starve, so fucking come negotiate. I think China was definitely instrumental in that. But even more so was Trump's strategy. Successive presidents of the United States have talked a big game and never done anything to North Korea. Trump threatened to press the little red button. That got everyone in there over in a huff. I think they took the threat seriously. I wouldn't necessarily as much. I don't think that Trump is pro-war at all. I don't think he wants to attack anyone, which is a breath of fresh air compared to what we've been through under Obama and under under Clinton to some extent. Certainly Herbert Walker. Herbert Walker he was big CIA bigwig. He loved bombing people. I think it's fine what's happening in Korea. My hope has always been for peace. Because I tend to be anti-war. The big thing is that up until Trump was elected, there was no reason to be optimistic. Things were worsening. You know, you have the hydrogen bomb test. And if this was going on and we had Hillary Clinton as president, I can think of two scenarios. Either we would have deployed nuclear weapons and killed everyone in North Korea so that she could prove that she was one of the big boys, or she would have done what Obama did, which is say, well, I condemn this. We're going to sanction you some more for developing hydrogen weapons. China wouldn't agree to it. She wouldn't have negotiated. She'd be too busy tippling tea in the UK or drinking wine in France or eating some fucking sausage in Germany. Vegan sausage, probably. And then nothing would get accomplished. We'd continue to kick the can down the road until something eventually happens. Japan invades, South Korea invades, China invades, and the whole thing falls to shit. I think Trump has the right idea with regards to the Korean Peninsula. He's attempting to export this foreign policy to Iran. I don't know if it'll work there. I hope it does. It'd be wonderful. I have to oppose threatening on principle, but it could indeed work. The same is true with North Korea. His talk loudly and carry an extremely large nuclear stick sort of thing worked in North Korea. Specifically, I think he convinced China that either it was in their fiscal benefit to go along with the United States' basic policy there for the most part, or he convinced them he actually was fucking insane. He listened to Kissinger, pulled it off, and has them convinced that the U.S. will actually invade North Korea if there's no peace treaty. The idea of there finally being an end to the Korean War, can you say 2020 re-election? Yeah, I think at that point you could. That's about all. Peace out.